Hey everybody, this is Peter. Welcome to the May 26th radio address. I apologize for the intermittency of these addresses because of my schedule recently, but I'm hoping to do some every few weeks just to keep everybody abreast of things. As most of you know, I do one every week usually, but because of the film and other things that have been going on, I've had to kind of take a break in order to keep myself in line with other priorities, but I do miss doing the radio show because there's always a lot to talk about, and I'm happy to see a number of you here in the chat room, and I have a lot of things to update you guys on, and things have been very interesting and very unique, very ambitious in development, so to speak, with a lot of things going on with the teams. We have the Venus Project World Tour, which has been fantastic. In fact, let me just start with that. I've been in contact with Jacques and Roxanne fairly frequently, and they have started this tour, for those of you that don't know, on April 6th, and it extends to October 23rd. And they have virtually sold out every venue that they have participated in thus far. They just got finished with Japan and India, two very unique countries, very different, obviously. Japan is a very interesting social organization, if you will. I'm a big fan of what Japan does, since they don't have the armaments attribute and a lot of the corporate shenanigans that deal with basically anti-life systems, if you will, which is what I consider the military-industrial complex to be. They have different avenues of expression, so I'm looking forward to hearing more about Japan and their experience there. But India, good response. I was just in contact with the individual that organized India, and he said things went very, very well. India is, of course, a very poor country. It's one of those countries that really needs a tremendous revision and a tremendous, I hate to say investment, but the poor countries like India, I'm hoping that these countries is really where the spark will occur for interest into a new system, because they are really the ones that suffer the most. But I'm not going to go into all of that as far as the second and third world countries that continue to be essentially raped by the corporate industrial complex. I will keep it at that. Their next event is June 5th in Slovenia, so I'm going to do my best to promote that through the movement. But anyone from Slovenia listening, please go and support the Venus Project if you can. This is a really important tour, and it's being heavily documented. It should resonate for quite a while. I've noticed a nice increase in our registrations for the movement, membership-wise, on the global site since they began this, since Zeitgeist Day, in fact. But if anyone wants any more information, go to thevenusproject.com for dates and locations. But I've been really happy with all of that. We passed the 400,000 mark as far as membership. I thought that was a fun thing. We always like whole numbers, don't we? And we think we have about 300, 500 people registering every day. I'm hoping that in the release of my new film, which I'm working very hard on, I'm slowly seeing the end through the fog, so to speak, even though I have a tremendous amount to do. But I'm hoping that this will energize things when it is released. And in a lot of ways, we have so many people that have been emailing me and joining our teams that want to get involved with projects, and are very, very excited that we don't even have enough work for them to do yet, which is why there's been a massive restructuring of our teams, or there's going to be a massive restructuring, bringing in more people. In fact, I'm going to talk about the communications team here in a second. But let me make sure I get through all my notes. I don't miss anything here. Yeah. Actually, let's just go straight into the team development, because it's very, very important. All right. As some of you know, we have the Zeitgeist Media Project, which is now online and uploaded. I want to give a special thanks to Zook, Daniel, for hammering this out, and the developers team, which has been phenomenal. I met with them last week. And it's a really terrific, smart group of people that have some tremendously good ideas. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how these interdisciplinary attributes start to come together and improve each project that we're doing. And the developers team, again, is a pivotal one. And I want to thank everyone out there that's working in that team. I intend to be more interactive with you. I've been focusing more on the communicative team as of now, but I see the importance of the developers team and all of the solutions that can be provided technically, which of course is very much in line with the message of the movement. But as far as the media project itself, a number of improvements are underway, such as blog comments that are going to be implemented, along with RSS feeds of the content, so we can create more of a community attribute that can be spread across multiple websites and groups. We're getting, I don't know, about 100 submissions, over 100 submissions a week, I think, last I checked, for visual and film media predominantly, and some audio in there. It's been a lot of fun to look through that. I hope everyone takes a second to go to the zeitgeistmediaproject.com to see some of the creative things that have been going on there. A big development with, I'm sure you're familiar with .sub, which is where we're doing a lot of our translations. I've been in contact with management of .sub. In fact, I met with G-Man, or Ray, who's also been in contact last night, to go over some technology that is going to be made available to us, for translations of our videos for free. In fact, they're very, very generous of them at .sub. I think because the Zeitgeist Addendum has gotten so many translations. I think it's one of the most translated movies they have there, and I think we're almost at 1 million views on .sub alone for that film. They've seen the merit of what we're doing. They believe in our direction. They want to help us out, and I really want to thank them personally, and I will be meeting with representatives of .sub next week when I get back from going out of town. But we can apply this to the Media Project, is my point. So we can begin to use the Media Project also as a tool, not only an expression, and create our own video atmosphere for uploads and translations. So this is a really big thing. And this is exactly the type of invitations and networking and interconnected collaboration that I've been seeking since we started. As you know, we don't take donations for the Zeitgeist Movement, and there's a reason for that, because I'd rather see people donate their time and then to begin to work with us in an organizational capacity, as opposed to blindly throwing money at something so they can kind of walk away from it and not have to worry about it and assume that their money goes somewhere and it does something. I won't even go on the tangent of how this kind of non-profit profit scheme works throughout the world in regard to donations and things like that, which people think actually help, say, poverty, which they think actually help, say, Rwanda or help Haiti, when in reality the third-party attribute, meaning the middlemen that actually orchestrate this, take a huge cut. And I've seen statistics on this. It's not an altruistic thing for these types of donations, but I'm going to leave it at that. Someone got on me recently about donations and in regard to being more active as far as community interest, in the sense that what are we doing now to help things. And I think what it comes down to is that there has to be an organization out there that starts from the beginning, that realizes the systemic root of most of the problems we see today. And that is, of course, the corporate free market system as we know it. And things will not happen in this system unless they're in support of this theocratic doctrine, if you will, where everything has to have money made off of it. And as long as everything is having money made off of it, there's going to be tremendous corruption and other problems. And this is a fundamental reality that I'm trying my best to bypass. Again, as I've said before, if we ever do take donations, it'll be for a specific project. But back to my point, I'm really happy to see organizations come forward and donate attributes of their own work to us and to work together. This is exactly how I want to see things unfold and spread, not through some type of monetary value or, ooh, the Zeitgeist Movement has lots of money. No, that's precisely the opposite of what I want to see happen. If we were to ever have an equipment issue, say we wanted to start an office or a project center, which has been up in the air for a while with, say, the Venus Project, say another area was allocated for us to begin an office where we could have, say, rotating people come and work personally, not remotely. We wouldn't do it through raising funds. We do it through donations of computer systems. We do it through donations of actual materials, actual resources. I know I might sound a little theoretical on this. I might sound a little fanciful in this kind of notion, but I hope you kind of see the poetry of it and why I think it's important. But then again, I don't rule anything out, so I won't belabor that point anymore. Where am I? Okay. Communications team. Newsletter. We're going to put out a newsletter for the movement. Now, this can extend to all international communities, of course, but we're going to start with the global site, and we're going to begin with, then we're going to do multiple translations, of course, and then the newsletter, the global newsletter will be distributed to everyone. This isn't to say that other groups can't put together their own newsletters. In fact, I definitely recommend it. I know some of our state chapters already have newsletters that they send out, which I receive periodically and I enjoy. But this is going to be a big thing for the global site. Newsletter will be composed of probably 7 to 10 articles initially, put out, I don't know, twice a month, every 2 weeks. I think that's probably a good way to do it. We are going to take submissions for newsletter articles, and we'll probably also have an in-house team eventually as well. On that note, I want to welcome Brandy Hume, which some of you may know, who is going to help us coordinate the communications team overall and is very much involved in the newsletter team, along with many other individuals that have already been active in the community, such as Thunder and Neil, VTV, and Fusion, and everyone else. But I want to welcome Brandy because she's new and she has a lot to offer, and she has a very nice understanding of what we're doing and has been very outspoken in the community and has shown just wonderful initiatives. So all these new people that are slowly coming in, I want to welcome all of you and just give my personal thanks, because this is how things spread. It doesn't take millions of us to make an effect. It takes a good set of dedicated individuals that are willing to do what they can. In fact, I want to elaborate on that real fast. Sometimes I get people that are a little too fanatic when they contact me, and they say things like, well, I've been doing this 10 hours a day. I want to see something happen. I'm willing to do this, this, and this. And in fact, that's almost a destructive mentality I've come to find. It's not acceptable to be fanatical about anything. As a general disposition, I have a very passive attitude. Not to say I don't believe in what I'm doing, but I don't give myself some kind of arbitrary sentiment that this action here has to have an immediate reaction, or therefore it's not viable. I tend to find this tendency a lot with new people that I talk to. And what I'd like to say is that those of you out there that want to do something, you don't have to spend 5 or 6 hours a day doing something. You could spend an hour a day, or if you don't have time for that, a couple hours a week helping promote this direction. If everyone just did a little bit and did not fall into the realm of extremity, not fall into super identification, and they just did a little bit to contribute to spreading this message or being active in the community group, you'd be amazed at what can be accomplished if everyone just put in a little bit of time. And I've been just blown away by the little things that have happened off the cuff, which have sparked unique reactions, such as I want to give special thanks to Chris, or AF Heretic, who provided us with the press release. Or actually, he orchestrated a bunch of community members to engage and input into this press release, and that is what we ended up with, which we sent out. I don't know if you guys have Google alerts for certain keywords, but I recommend it. You can go to Google and you can put keyword alerts set to email, which will send you Google alert searches that relate to whatever keyword you specified. So I have the Zeitgeist Movement, of course, as an alert. So anything that comes up in the internet, essentially, regarding the Zeitgeist Movement gets alerted to me, and I get to see what's happening. And I was amazed to see how many of these press releases made it to numerous blogs across the world. And now, again, just one little thing. Press releases have been something that we've talked about before, but we've been so busy trying to develop our architecture, internal infrastructure, that we just haven't had a chance to do it, just like the newsletter. But coupled in with the newsletter, and I apologize if I'm talking too fast, there's just a lot of stuff I want to go over. Coupled in with the newsletter, we're going to begin doing more press releases as well. The global, I feel like a rubbernecker these days watching this slow global debt-driven collapse that's grinding essentially the planet to a halt, and will be capitulated by the looming energy crisis as millions of barrels of oil pour into one of our most neededly respected and precious resource attributes, ecosystem generating environmental, God, I can't even talk today. In other words, all the oil that's spilling into the ocean is comedically horrible. And it opens up an entirely new avenue of criticism regarding what we're doing in the production complex, going offshore for all this drilling because we're running out of oil, which is essentially what's happening. And there's a question about that I have in my list of questions, so I won't belabor any of that. Let's see here. What was I talking about? Okay, we're back to the communications team. Newsletter, press releases. This is in the works. We have teams set up. And if you want to submit a press release or a newsletter article about content you feel will be viable and in context of the movement, you can send it to newsletter@thezeitgeistmovement.com. NEWSLETTER@thezeitgeistmovement.com. And I look forward to weeding through some submissions. We got quite a few submissions with the original forum post that we did. And it's been really great to see that. I'm looking forward to this being a very large and informative project, which should create a great archive in time of important articles relevant to what we're doing. I won't even go through the list of attributes that would be relevant to newsletters, such as the societal breakdown issues that we're going through, the advancement of technology. Those will be posted very soon as we get some infrastructure organization. The developers team, by the way, has volunteered to create a custom infrastructure, meaning a submission system, an approval system, and then a means of going to linguistics team, of course, which do the translations. So we can have maybe 10 or so translations every time this newsletter goes out, but they've been working on that. So anyway, I won't belabor it. Lots of things happening with that. General team reforms. Since all of our teams are basically interdisciplinary, meaning they really kind of work together, none of the teams we have can really function separately. We're going to reformat the teams based on their actions and not general arbitrary overviews of what they do, such as activism or education or communications. So expect to see some reformatting of that. We have the linguistics team, we have the newsletter press release team, we have our media project team, which of course Apollo right now has been happily moving forward. And, a great favor. Great thanks to Apollo for helping out with that in the approval of content. And of course we have the lecture team, which is another sub-team, which Ben McLeish of the UK, which some of you might have seen some of his lectures that have been put forward. I think he's still waiting to put one up that I've been looking forward to seeing. But if you type in Ben McLeish into YouTube, you can find some of his work. And I'm going to try and work with him to create a curriculum, if you will, a series of videos that will not only go through the fundamentals of what the movement represents and the Venus Project represents, but also how to deal with the most frequently asked questions and how to communicate these issues. We need to get more people besides myself and the handful of us that are kind of speaking publicly. We need to get more of us out there. That's very important. Let's see, where am I? Those team. I think that's just about it as far as... Yeah, From Earth to Venus. From Earth to Venus is something that's in the works now, and there's a very prolific thread that is on the Zeitgeist Movement forum that talks about From Earth to Venus. If anyone's interested in this project, I've gone over that numerous times before, so I'm not going to go into it again here. But that's the next on our agenda, apart from the newsletter team. But those are functional. From Earth to Venus is a much larger, much more complex project, and if you're not familiar with it, please look into it. Apart from that, quick note, I got an invitation to do a independent TED Talk in Portugal in March of 2011. So that'll be right after Zeitgeist Day. So that's kind of fun. It's a TEDx event in Portugal. But, people talk about TED a lot. TED gets a lot of attention, so that should be good. And since I mentioned Zeitgeist Day 2011, our anticipation is to do this in the UK. One thing you might have noticed from the Z-Day map is that European versus American events are probably 5 or 6 or 7 or even 10 to 1. I'd say we have many more European international events as opposed to domestic U.S. events. So this has shown the grim and the natural reality. The United States is probably going to be one of the last countries to undergo any form of social change. The indoctrination is so powerful. The corporate center, the home of this global corporate system really resides in the United States through Wall Street and the like. So we're going to move, I think, for the main event. We're going to probably do this in Europe. I suspect London. I've been talking to individuals about that. We could sell out numerous events in Europe as opposed to the stuff that we do in the States. This year was, of course, very good. We sold it out in New York, but and I'm not putting down the wonderful Americans that have come to our event from across the country or even across the world. But I'm having the input and the excitement of Europe has been just trumps the States. So we're going to start focusing more on Europe than the States, and in a general sense. Obviously, we want to focus on the more difficult areas like the United States, but I think we get much more press in Europe. I think we get much more attention in Europe overall. In fact, the majority of our press has come from Europe and beyond the States overall. So anyway, let's see. Is that all the announcements I have? I think that's it. But lots of stuff, and I could probably ramble on about other things that are developing, but I want to kind of leave it at that. What I'd like to do now, by the way, Dark Dancer Gilbert is going to pop in about 40 minutes, a little less than 40 minutes, to give an update on the international chapters, or the chapters in general. And so that'll be good, so expect that. And before I go into any questions, I wanted to Yeah. Okay, excuse me. Before I go into any questions, I wanted to go through interaction I had recently through email regarding the nature of this kind of global debt breakdown that we're seeing, this capitulation of extreme money multiplied debt, which is what is systemically moving around the planet like a cancer, causing all of these country collapses: Portugal, Greece, Iceland. The question that was presented to me, which was the first time I'd ever thought about it, is someone asked me how this related to the free market system in its simplistic form, drawing this line that we do. And I thought it was an interesting question. I gave it some thought, and I wanted to kind of relay a little bit of what I had kind of come up with in regards to this, because it is interesting to track the evolution of this supposed free market as from its origins, such as from Adam Smith and the like. And what you find out is that the free market system started off as extremely simple and very innocuous. I mean, money was a mere tool of exchange. It wasn't the basic axiom, the early free market ideology was the pursuit of one's private interests in the market, and it will promote the public good if you seek your own private personal interests. And I think to a certain degree at some point that was actually the case. I think in the simplicity of the free market, which again is a part of the evolution of society. It isn't like something should not have happened. But what's happened is the basic premise of the free market, this self-interest relationship that's supposed to relate to the public good, has mutated in a cancerous form, which is as described in Social Pathology and eloquently described in the book The Cancer Stage of Capitalism by John McMurtry. It goes to show that there's a total mutation that's occurred from what the original concepts of the free market are to what they are today. Now, I will argue that this mutation is within a specific line of thought, meaning the free market hasn't been hijacked. The free market hasn't become distant. It hasn't separated itself from some ideal that used to exist. This is what's promoted today by a lot of people that want to return to something that, as far as I'm concerned, never existed. Think about it. The basic premise of the market is self-interest, which is supposed to relate through an invisible hand, if you will, by the words of Adam Smith, to the public good. Well, what is actually manifested through time? While that might have served a sustainable role to a certain period, as we know, things change and they multiply and they morph, and the memes of ideas begin to exaggerate in certain areas, reinforcements of the environment begin to push certain social conventions into areas that might have never been anticipated. That's the nature of evolution in general. So what we have today is something that's absolutely different than any original premise, at least I would say it's absolutely different, but it's still within the same train of thought. We have this grotesque evolution that money is now made not off of utility goods to improve the quality of the life of society or the individual. The focus is explicitly on money being made off of more money. This, as many of you know, usury, which is this ancient term used to denote interest, it has a more complex meaning, though. Usury also relates to the fact that money is simply being made with no productive attribute whatsoever. It's not only an abusive thing to make money off of money, meaning making money off of somebody else and their capital base with nothing in exchange except for the loaning of other money. But usury, the problem with usury ultimately is the fact that money is being generated with nothing to relate to it as far as a physical referent. Money being made on money, which is now the end in and of itself. The life support attributes, good food, clean air, all the attributes that creates a healthy society, as I talked about at length with the work of Richard Wilkinson in his book, The Spirit Level, where he denotes specifically all of these powerful studies that show how unhealthy tremendous stratification, which is coupled straight in to those countries that execute the most money manipulation as opposed that do not. There's a tremendous health problem here. So the interest is never the support of society anymore. It can't be. It's about money being made off of money. This is what defines the corporate free market system as it has mutated today. So what do we have? We have a world now where trading profits far exceed any doctor or any type of health professional. I think I denoted this statistic in the lecture where the most profitable job you can really have is in the field of hedge fund management. These individuals make over $300 million a year, well over $300 million a year. The most profitable thing you can do in the world today is the buying and selling of money and the multiplication of money and the loaning of money and making interest off of money and trading and investing money for the sake of money. The growth of money is now the end in and of itself, and everything that supports life is secondary. Again, this has spread itself into the very countries. This mechanism now overarched by, well, actually that's a big leap, but let me step back before I go into that, in fact. What do we have? We have central banks. We have central banks, which are cartels of private banking institutions, which make the loans to corporations, put the corporations into debt very often that they don't repay. This same mechanism is displaced and recreated in the governmental sphere with the IMF, the World Bank, and the international finance institutions that now make a profit off of the indebtedness of other governments. They refinance debts of other governments and bail them out at their own benefit. And these are cartels. Again, it's a private enterprise consequence that we have these international finance institutions which essentially make money off of demise of society, and it has nothing to do with the betterment of humanity. If you go back into parts 2 of Zeitgeist Addendum with John Perkins, and we describe the World Bank, none of these supposed success stories, the success stories you tend to hear in Guatemala and all of these places historically that have been bailed out by the IMF and the World Bank, what you tend to find is that they relate only to GDP growth. That's it. And as if you remember from social pathology, GDP has very little to do with the betterment of society itself, because very often the money that's moved around is moved around only by a select few, as per the Citigroup documents about the plutonymy that exists in the wealthy countries of the world. But this also applies to the poor countries as well. So point being, again, I don't want to belabor this, if you track the outcomes of these interventions of the IMF and the World Bank, there usually is an increase in GDP. There's also a tremendous increase in debt, and the standard of living of the majority of the population, and along with all those social services through these structural adjustment policies, compromised so the debt is guaranteed to be repaid to these government financial institutions. All of these attributes come into play to destroy essentially the well-being of the majority of the populations in these areas. And this is exactly what you're going to see in Greece, and you're going to see in Iceland. I'm not sure the situation of Iceland, but any of these institutions that have agreed to go forward with these massive loans, I want everyone to pay attention to what actually happens. I want everyone to pay attention to the structural adjustment packages that are put forward. Just look at what happened to Russia. Did Russia benefit well when the Iron Curtain fell and then the oligarchs took over and suddenly the free market was instated? Russia had, I believe, 60 to 80% unemployment at one point after the collapse. Nothing good came out of the fall economically for Russia, except for the power consolidation of different groups, exactly how it mirrors in the United States as it is today. So I've gone on quite a bit of a tangent here, and I apologize if I was a little abstract or if I went off the topic. What I'd like to point out, back to my original point, is that this global debt breakdown is a manifestation of the free market mutation. It's a manifestation of this incessant need for a perpetual money multiplication, which has compounded itself into a situation for these governments where it's impossible for them to pay back their debt. In fact, in a lot of the rhetoric of these individuals at the IMF, they don't have any anticipation of these countries ever paying back their debts, ever. They just want to make sure the interest payments are secure and the payments are made consistently. So I wanted to throw that out there a little bit because I know I haven't talked about that much. A lot of people seem to think that there's a criminal conspiracy that relates to the mechanisms that undergo a lot of these things. And while there is a criminal conspiracy being executed almost every day on this planet as a byproduct of the need of self-interest, both corporate and personal, what's to be understood is that what's happening is a manifestation of the system itself. And now people say to me, monetary reform, like what should we do to stop things? And of course, as you know, I'm not a big fan of monetary reform unless you want to overhaul the entire system. But if I was to comedically throw out there what kind of monetary reform would be necessary to improve things right now, you would shut down every single private bank in the world. and you would force them not to operate with any form of profit. It would be totally socialized, if you will. And then the ultimate thing you would do is shut down every single trading establishment on the planet as well. It should be made completely illegal to trade derivatives or trade the, quote, stock of any institution, because it only decouples from any type of life value. It has always decoupled. The illusion of investment in the early stage of the free market was extremely simplistic. It has, again, mutated into this ridiculous money-on-money scheme. And if you want to see any sanity in the modern world today, should be a campaign not for more legislation for Wall Street, but to remove the tumor itself, such as the New York Stock Exchange, to begin to remove the cancer itself, which is the speculation of currency and the multiplication of currency, the buying and selling of people and debt, the buying and selling of abstractions that, again, relate to absolutely nothing, but do generate real fiscal realities which have consequences systemically across the world. So that's my contribution for monetary reform. And who knows, maybe in the future of the Zeitgeist Movement we can begin a campaign to attempt to get at least the public awareness to remove the trading enterprise as we know it. As some of you might know about my history, I engaged in equity trading for many years until I realized what I was actually doing. My interest was self-serving just like anyone else's. I didn't want to have a job and work for somebody, so I engaged in home private equity trading and realized that, you're just making money off of money. But to me, it was a compromise because I said to myself, well, I don't want to have a job or a boss. I like contributing, I like making things, but in my field, what am I supposed to do? Work in advertising for the rest of my life? How much more meaningless can it get? But then I realized as I was doing this, this contributes nothing. This is a disease. The ultimate disease is the market system and the trading mechanisms that are currently in place today. And if, again, there was any real interest by government, if there's any real interest by the Obama administration, if there's any real interest by any government on the planet to stop the systemic crisis that will probably trigger a breakdown and bankruptcy of, every country on the planet, I suspect. Because if you track the interrelationships of the global financial structure, nothing is immune. And where do you think this money is going to go? What happens when the IMF and the World Bank go bankrupt? The Federal Reserve can theoretically go bankrupt as well. Anyway, that is my contribution to monetary reform, and I'm going to leave it at that and go into your questions. Wow, I'm awfully rambly today. Hope you guys are following me. I'm a little tired, but I wanted to make these points because I think they're really important. The ultimate point is that what we're seeing today is a systemic consequence of what the system supports. It's not the error of legislation. It's simply what the system continues to create and reinforce. And if you choose to think outside of the system, you're going to be disregarded. You're not going to be given respect. You're not going to be given media time. To disagree with the monetary theology, the religion that's in place across the world in this global free market system is to be a heretic and to be ignored. And a lot of the attacks that our movement now receives from various economists and the like, it stems from this type of knee-jerk reaction, nothing more. Again, I have yet to see one viable criticism of our work from any group that actually goes into what we're doing and what we're talking about. I've yet to see it. Anyway, questions? Dun, 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 dun. By the way, those of you that put forum questions up and there's links to audio and video or articles that you want me to read, very rarely do I have an opportunity before the radio show to do that, especially right now because I've been very busy. So if I skip your question about a specific person or a specific article, I don't mean anything by it. I just didn't have a chance to actually look at it. Number one, how do you feel about media literacy being implemented into the movement? Well, I'd have to have a little more clarification on what you mean by media literacy. If you assume like programming, like how to use video editing software, how to use publishing software, yes. I mean, obviously communication media is very important. As far as media literacy being implemented into the movement, I'm not quite sure what kind of campaign can work like that. I would hope, and with the internet, almost anyone can go out and learn. Anybody can make a movie now. Windows Movie Maker and a $500 HD camera, and you have people making full movies. That's really fascinating, actually, to see how much media is now available. I think media literacy is on its way to being extremely common, but if someone wanted to create a forum post, for example, to ask about certain questions technically about how to do better, say in the communication section of the forum, I'm all for it. But other than that, I think I'd have to have more of a specific question. Number 2, I'm from Vancouver, Canada. One of, if not the most, active chapters in the world right now. Well, I will just so you know, I have to go to Vancouver tomorrow. I'm going to be in touch with some of you guys. Unfortunately, my schedule is really tight while I'm there, but I'll be in touch if you're listening. Anyway, I'll keep going. He continues, or she continues, what's made us so successful is very simple. Setting up our Zeitgeist Vancouver booth downtown every week or 2 with DVDs, info pamphlets, and various other paraphernalia. We speak to hundreds of passerbys each day with about a 95% positive response. I wanted to ask if you could emphasize the necessity for all chapters to be doing this, as this is much more effective than holding closed meetings for chapter members where awareness is not really spread. Well, I really want to commend you on what you're doing in the very simple street activism, because it is effective and it can be effective, and I absolutely agree. I've done things like that here in New York personally, and I certainly advocate it. I'm not here to. I probably should give more suggestions as to chapters as far as what they should be doing, though. Overall, it's kind of self-evident. By the way, there's one thing I want to comment on. We're going to have a chapters website very soon. It will be. I'm not going to give out the domain name because it's not set up yet, but which will have more information on it for suggestions. It'll also have a feedback attribute where people can post suggestions about things that they're doing in their community. I'm really happy to hear that the Vancouver, Canada chapter is doing this, and this is something that we would post on that site to get people active. Overall, everyone needs to be out there doing whatever they can in a live setting, if you can. That's pretty much all I can say, and I thank you, Vancouver, Canada, for being so diligent. Number 3, this is a question about incentive. I've been reading extensively about what truly motivates human beings, namely a book by Alfie Kahn called Punished by Rewards, and another one you've recommended, Drive, by Daniel Pink, that find that intrinsic motivation, liking what you do, in parentheses, is way more effective at producing lasting results than extrinsic motivation, which tends to cripple creativity, productivity, interest in the task. The findings, which certainly make sense, seem to criticize the old B.F. Skinner thoughts about reinforcement and behavior, namely what is known as operant conditioning. But Jock always recommends Skinner as for his scientific explanations to human behavior. I wanted to ask how you settle this discrepancy. Well, I'd have to get a better sense of the discrepancy you're driving at. As far as the Daniel Pink work, I didn't really see any conflict with my understanding of B.F. Skinner. I mean, operant conditioning is the use of both reinforcement and punishment. So if you really think about, we have reinforcement and punishment. What is it that creates an internal drive for a human being? Is it an external issue or is it internal? This opens up a whole vast realm of philosophical notions about what it means to be motivated to do anything and where that motivation, in fact, comes from. I thought Daniel Pink did a great job of differentiating between creative concepts and factory-oriented concepts, and how pressure and the monetary motivation does not work for more creative issues, while factory-driven mechanical issues, which as far as the Zeitgeist Movement is concerned shouldn't exist at all, should be done by machines, those do have a drive through monetary motivations. But as far as the contradiction you see with Skinner, Skinner has been around for a long time. Some of his work, I think, holds up very, very well, and I think other work is subject to intervention, if you will, from newer analysis that might contradict or override some of his ideas. But I think overall his basic disposition holds up extremely well. Jock said he called up B.F. Skinner one day and he asked Skinner if he thought the human being was essentially a machine, and B.F. Skinner stated that it's too soon to tell. And I think really what it comes down to is when you understand that what goes into our mental structure and what comes out of it is highly interrelated. And operant conditioning, of course, is obviously very important. Not to say that punishment necessarily is a good thing. It definitely comes more in the form of positive reinforcement. If you read, individuals that talk a lot about crime, you tend to find that those that engage in, say, really violent crimes are very different from, say, the petty criminals. Their mentalities are much more extreme. They don't really care about being caught. Punishment isn't a concern for the truly damaged and violent criminals, but that's for another conversation. Overall, it's a very big question, and I can't see the contradiction you're describing because I think Skinner has denoted a lot of these attributes with reinforcement and punishment. They do go hand in hand, but punishment, of course, is really not the way to go overall. I think that's what we've learned in the modern day. Positive reinforcement, in fact, does. And I think what it really comes down to is the society that you live in sets up these operant condition mechanisms, whether you like it or not. And you can either go with what is reinforced or you can go against it, which will relate to punishment. And whatever society sets up is assumed to be the ultimate truth. And, of course, that isn't the case at all, as we've described. What's reinforced in our current culture is highly detrimental to our life support systems, as I've just explored with this money-on-money processing. Ooh, you can't challenge the free market. You can't challenge corporate freedom through these free trade zones that manipulate slave labor and ultimate pollution because there's no legislation. The freedom of the current system, as a mild tangent, relates to the freedom of the corporation, not the individual, not the freedom of choice. It's about the freedom of the corporate power to do whatever the hell they want to, and they play upon this anti-big government bullshit where they say, oh, big government, we don't want big government, no, we can't have a healthcare system, that's big government, I don't want the U.S. government in my healthcare system, and all the rhetoric you see about what happened with the supposed healthcare reforms, universal healthcare and the like. The ultimate scapegoat is for these institutions is to deny, quote, big government, which is the mask of saying we don't want anyone to interfere with our ability to make money. And that's nothing but parasitic and destructive. Where was I? Number 4. Much thought occurs in language. This is the beginning of the question. Much thought occurs in language. Actually, this is a truncated one. Excuse me. I truncated this. By the way, some of you that ask me questions, please don't make them so long, because I can't read all of them. And I have to go through and kind of break them up and assume that what I've put together is, in fact, a reflection of your question, which, as far as I can tell, I think I did accurately, but as a general note. Number 4, much thought occurs in language. Our language, therefore, affects what thoughts we can have. If we do not have a word for a concept, then we will not be able to formulate thoughts about it. Words such as pain, joy, and desire all imply the existence of qualia, subjective mental states that are irreducible to physical states. These words, according to materialists, mislead us. We should therefore eliminate this folk psychology, in parentheses, from our language in order to eliminate it from our thought. What do you think about this philosophy of mind? Do you think this is part of what Jacques is talking about regarding reconstructing language to reflect reality? That's a very interesting and complex question. As far as dualities of language, I agree. It's one thing I had written about a long time ago was language always exists in a realm of paradox. It kind of has to, as we know it today. You can't really differentiate and designate anything in language without separating something from whatever you're describing. So there's always a perpetual duality in the language that we use today. Jacques has commented numerous times on possible languages, possible new languages, what would comprise them. I know that there are other counter languages out there that build upon different ideas. I don't have the names in front of me right now. Overall, I agree with you that such words as pain and joy and desire imply, a kind of they imply exact attributes. They imply differentiations and ultimately dualities. And yes, this can relate to the way we see the world around us as far as separatism. This can relate to our basic schema, if you will, of perception, which I'm sure it does. So while I agree with you, I simply cannot speculate on how such resolution can occur. I have no idea how language can be altered. I can theorize certain things, but as far as the actual presence of language, what I would say is that somehow language has to be reduced to very technical terms. And we've already begun doing that. With the advent of the physical sciences and the advent of the scientific method and, of course, mathematical creations, which are highly tangible and often near empirical, at least in their internal logic, we've really moved in a direction that's become much better than what it used to be. But I wish I could give more of a response to your question because it's a very difficult one. But I generally agree with what you have to say. Number 5, what will inspire us in a resource-based economy after we remove war, violence, drama, and other so-deemed aberrant behaviors? Will our ability to create in fields, parentheses, in fields such as stories, visual media, and other forms of entertainment, will our ability to create be diminished along with our violent ideals? I understand that competition has its negative influences, but why can't competition just be a form of fun? If you take away what makes violence and war so negative, what will it be then? It's an odd question. With war, violence, and many other forms of drama gone, I fear that we may lose a decent portion of our creativity. Maybe violence will just be considered as a primitive aspect of our society, or perhaps we can evolve our concept of what we think of violence. Okay, I'm going to have to get a little apprehensive with that one, because what you're kind of saying is you're justifying a sort of a state of aberrancies in the modern world as justifiable for the sake of creative expression. While I will agree that a tremendous amount of creative expression has emerged from problems, I would also say that creative expression has also served to resolve a lot of growing problems throughout time. You have ancient songs about slavery and value systems associated with slavery that exist in archives now that talked about its horrible relationship, anti-human relationship. And I believe art in that context serves a role of resolution. In fact, I would say the same thing about, in fact, that's exactly what the Zeitgeist Media Project is about. But to go so far to say that life artistically will be boring without problems such as war and violence, I think is a bit of a stretch and a little narrow. But I agree, generally speaking, that art is definitely influenced by problems, but art is also influenced by positive things. Art is not always triggered by problems. As far as war and violence, there's really no sustainable attribute of war and violence. Let's bring it to a more tangible level. Is war and violence sustainable? Can cultures at war be sustainable? As Carl Sagan pointed out, and I reiterated at the end of Zeitgeist 1, an organism at war with itself is doomed. And essentially what you see today in the market system or in the interrelationships of most countries today is everything's at war. The entire planet is at war with itself. The human species is in perpetual war with itself, and that is just simply not sustainable, very simply. So sustainability overrides creative expression. If I have to give up a certain degree, and again, I don't think creative expression will be hindered by more peaceful resolutions of society, but if I was to have to give up a certain creative association that was spawned from a negative attribute of society, with the positive attribute of sustainability coming in and being reinforced, knowing that I'm going to have a better life on the real life level, well, I'll have to detach my values and realign my values towards what's actually sustainable. You know, and that brings up an entirely different point, which I've been thinking about, which I'll bring up very quickly. Do your values matter? Does anything that I think or you think really mean anything? Do your values have a physical referent is the real question. And if your values don't have a physical referent, if your values aren't in line with survival, if of course you have the interest to survive, then everything else you think, then your values do not have a basis for support and they need to be altered. Human values will be the ultimate revolution, if you will. The revolution of human values is the ultimate revolution in the things that we talk about, because there's so much aberration in what people enjoy and like in the modern world. There's such a grave sickness of social pathology about what is reinforced in society and what people absorb through advertising, and then they make a part of their identity and they think that this is what a viable value would consist of. Only values that can be supported are ones that are actually sustainable. So having a value towards war is provably unsustainable. Having a value towards an us against them mentality is provably unsustainable. Having a value towards having the feeling the need to throw garbage on the street as you walk down it is utterly unsustainable. Anything that's pollution-oriented is unsustainable. Anything that creates conflict is provably unsustainable. This is a much larger topic, but I think this relates to your question. If you value seeing conflict, then you're unfortunately a victim of culture like the rest of us. I'm sure everyone remembers the old George Carlin bit where he talks about how he loves seeing death and destruction and bad news. I love bad news. I want to see a paint factory explode. I want to see a tornado hit a church on Sunday. I want to see people with crutches jumping off the top of a building that's on fire. he draws amusement from it in a comedic sense because there is a reinforcement of the culture to want to experience this type of excitement because it's on every single television show. It's in every movie. Violence is there's a romantic relationship with violence now, and it's horrible. And it's also very much it's also very relative too. You don't see people getting excited about necrophilia. I think through time, things like murder that we see on television, all the things that people love, this obsession with guns, through time, as we continue to evolve, they will become more and more aberrant in their appearance, just like Christians being fed to lions in ancient Rome. If that happened today, I think you'd see some tremendous upheaval. And I think in the future people will look back and they'll look at all the media and they'll look in horror, just as we look in horror as Christians being fed to lions back in the day. So I will leave it at that. Art, I'm an artist. Art can come from positive things, not just negative. And I tend to like art that comes from positive things more than negative, because negative-inspired art tends to be very depressing too. But that's the place of art, to actually create change. And again, the Zeitgeist Media Project. All right, now where am I? Number 5? Number 6. Let's see. 7 minutes, I'll bring Gilbert on. Number 6, when the economic collapse occurs, and if we lose power or losing the internet along with it, how do you think the Zeitgeist Movement will adapt? Will it be able to remain intact and grow? What are some suggestions for the members of the movement? Look, we really can't think about that right now. The power is not just going to go off. It's not going to work like that. You're not going to wake up one day and suddenly there's no electricity. It's going to be a slow grinding halt where demand is destroyed for electricity, probably with the loss of natural gas and petroleum relationships. In certain areas, the third world will happen first, and slowly it will trickle across the planet without a rapid energy solution being proposed globally. So I really can't answer that question. I mean, there are things that can be considered as far as general communication, as far as radios and stuff like that, but I that's too far down the road. It's not really worth speculating on at this time. There's many, many years of functionality left, and I'm hoping that something will change enough to the effect where we don't have to worry about that type of economic collapse where it really begins to invade the life sustenance of people, which it already is, but I really hope it doesn't result in something as extreme as you denote anytime soon, but we'll see what happens. Number 7, in thinking of starting the Zeitgeist Movement Evidence Wiki, a wiki where every single claim that has been made by yourself in the Venus Project and the Zeitgeist Movement is linked to a scientific study, should I bother with this, or will the knowledge base eventually cover it? The knowledge base, which is going very slowly because I've been caught up with other things, is an attempt to cover the most important attributes of what we do. As far as an evidence wiki for specific ideas, that's an interesting idea. Meaning, say you want to investigate nanotechnology, you could put a wiki to denote, create a wiki to denote all of the advents of nanotechnology and to keep people apprised of it. I like direct ideas like that. Second part of your question, do you see Mike Rupert's collapse probable this year? If so, what then with the Zeitgeist Movement? Mike Rupert's collapse within the next year? The collapse is likely going to continue. The evidence, and I think there's another question that talks about this as well. I'm not in a position to foresee what Mike Rupert claims to foresee in the immediate sense, and I would have to say I do not think that any type of absolute severe collapse will occur based on energy alone within the next year, but I think the economic collapse could compound things in ways that we really can't understand yet. So I'm going to leave it at that. Number 3, how's the new movie coming along? The new movie's fine. I have a long ways to go. I'm still trying for the fall release, but we'll see what happens. As a quick note, which I probably shouldn't state because I don't know if it's going to happen, but I have some celebrity interest in the film, celebrity cameo by a very famous actor, which I happen to really like. But I'll leave it at that. We'll see what happens. In our bizarre culture, people tend to listen to actors and movie stars and musicians and basketball players more than they do politicians or scientists or anyone that actually, moves society forward. So having that type of entertainment, fame attribute coupled in to give people that relief, say, ooh, there's an actor that is involved with something. Believe it or not, people actually think that way. And every tabloid that you see in any supermarket is proof of that. Anyway, this sort of fascination with the celebrity culture. All right, number 8. For many months, I have a big worry and frustration about the participation of the movement with local communities and their social and political issues, but without getting mixed up or change our direction as a movement. But without getting mixed up or change our direction as a movement. As you already know by now, the situation globally does not look good. Not look that it is getting any better anytime soon. So our communities need the movement's support physically, not DVD or T-shirts or free hugs. They need a group of people that, besides understanding them, are with them working to solve their problems. Okay, we need a real connection to communities. Okay, look, as I said before, the infancy of the Zeitgeist Movement is such that we are not engaging in direct community activities in the sense of resolution of any particular problem. We're not protesting banks right now. We're not trying to resolve, say, the home foreclosures that really shouldn't be happening whatsoever, exceedingly anti-human. If there was any respect in the government, they would have stopped those foreclosures immediately. But we are attempting to get the public aware of the root cause of the majority of problems of the social architecture. That is what our role is right now. I want to reiterate that again. This isn't to say that we're not going to have active campaigns. And I really don't appreciate the berating that occurs with some that say, oh, the Zeitgeist Movement, they don't really do anything. Well, actually, we're doing a hell of a lot. We're doing what no one else either knows to do or doesn't have the courage to do. And that is starting from the beginning, starting from the systemic front of most of the world's problems that we see today, which comes out of the corporate free market system. So until that's resolved, until focus is made on that, until there's a public awareness, which again is happening. Again, in my life, this is the first time I've seen protests against banks. It's the first time I've seen people go to the CEOs of banks, the bank CEOs' houses in protest and go straight into Citibank and their lobbies in New York. This is amazing. It's foreshadowing an awakening, if you will, that I think is going to be very profound, which I'm hoping that we are very much participant of, and will get these people that are angry at the individuals and the corporations in line to say, no, these people are a consequence of the system. We have to go to the root cause and eliminate the root cause, because these people, these corporations, these motivations, these intents, this general dwelling of self-interest is not going to change until the reinforcement and the operant conditioning of the system itself is altered. Number 9, what would be more, actually, hold on, let me jump to, that's 4 o'clock, hold on, I'm going to bring on Gilbert. So other set of questions that I wanted to get to beforehand. All right, let's see here, let me find old Gil. Give me 1 second, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Problem with the switchboard of Blog Talk is you really can't see who's who. I see we have some people up there. All right, Gil's calling in. Let me answer one more question while Gil calls in. In a resource-based economy, there is to rise people. Okay. There's an interest to raise people to their highest potential. Could this lead to segregation because someone is not as high as someone else with their occupation, state of mind, i.e. nanotech scientist versus farmer? I know that there will be no farmers, especially because of automation, but I just want to give this as an example. Segregation, now that is exactly what we want to avoid. There's no segregation based on skill set. Everyone, if you have a skill set that engages, say, in industrial planning or energy mining or anything that relates to production, there's a place for it. You know, if someone doesn't have a skill set that's applicable, well, that's contingent upon the educational system. There's also going to be, again, such a dramatic reduction in the nonsensical occupations that exist today that there will be almost a breath of fresh air of freedom for those, which again couples in with this newly spawned value system, which will have to come to fruition, where people are willing to work for their own personal interest, which is the community interest, not for some arbitrary self-interest payment that's abstract and unrelated to the world around them, meaning it's not related on resources, and simply It's simply there for self-interest generation to have more and more money. All of those things are gone, as I described before. So segregation, no, I don't see how that would happen. I mean, if someone doesn't have a skill set over someone else, that doesn't mean anything. It just means that someone's good at one thing and someone else isn't. It's not a segregation. Obviously, I'm not a physician. I'm not going to be performing open heart surgery because I don't have the skills to do so. That's how there'll be a natural division of labor, if you will, as people move to where their education is most focused. And of course, we want to detach again from specialization as far as general education. People need to have a very rounded sense of their education and what they understand so they can understand the world around them. One of the main reasons that the U.S. military has so many high scientists and technicians working for them developing weapons is because these scientists don't know any better. I think if these, as Jacques Fresco pointed out many times before, he doesn't even consider them to be scientists because he defines a scientist as someone entirely different, a scientist that is interested in understanding the world around them holistically in an interdisciplinary sense, not just one isolated person that's locked into a particular paradigm, paid by a corporation, simply relating to the payment scheme and the money sequence. All of that's gone. Anyway, I'll stop rambling. All right, here we go. Oh, hold on a second. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. This is one of those aggravations of... Who's there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there
Hello?
we go. I had to guess on the switchboard there, but luckily I got you. How you doing, Gil?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Bouncing along. So how's the chapters community doing?
Well, all I can say is getting busier and busier, and overall a lot of good developments. Got a lot of points to touch on, so I will go and jump into them in a second. I just wanted to comment on something that you mentioned in one of your questions, where somebody was laying out what wasn't going right with the movement and what we should be doing.
Right.
These are a lot of things that we get day by day. If I could show any one of you my inbox, there are a lot of people who get excited for the movement and they have a lot of planned out ideas like we should do it this and this way. But one thing that every enthusiastic individual that comes to the movement should remember is that we're already in the process of organization trying to get things working. So when you come over and have a lot of ideas that are already set in stone and aren't flexible anymore, it's not going to help in getting the movement forward. The best thing to do for now would be to join and see where your ideas could fit in, such as participating in your chapter, participating in meetings. This is the way you can, in a neutral way, present these ideas, because if you just come at us and send either Pierre, me, or any other team coordinator an email, saying, well, we should do this and that, and I think you're doing it wrong right now, then there's a very big chance that at that point in time we're more inclined to ignore you than to actually take you serious. But if you actually start participating and start thinking with us on how we could better things, there will be a much higher chance that your ideas will be used and have more ground, so to say, because all the chapters are able to evaluate them as well. So, first announcement, as most of you know, today is the International Chapters meeting. This is essentially every week on Wednesday, 2300 GMT, and you can check www.timeanddate.com to see what that translates into for you. It's 2 hours from now, usually. This is essentially the main place where you should be if you are willing to get involved actively on the international level, because a lot of the decision making in the movement, in a way, gets decided in the international meeting. The reason for this is because there are heads of international chapters. Peter joins in regularly. The teams join in here as well. This is the venue where we can actually make group decisions. I see a lot of complaints going on sometimes. Well, when and where was this decided on any given issue? And most likely it would be that it is discussed in an international meeting. So as long as we don't have other protocols for decision making within the movement, please visit the international meeting if you can attend that. We recently started, a couple of months ago actually, to do United States meetings and now European meetings. And more recently, we also started to do Latin American meetings. So any type of feedback you want to give on the progress and decision making within the movement should be done at these venues. This is the way you can actually contribute to how the movement progresses over time. Okay, let me not go on too long about that point. So let's start with the recent chapter additions, because it's a little bit unfair, but I have, due to my inbox, the best insight in what is going on in the movement as far as the chapters that are developing worldwide. And I would be very excited to share with you that the recent additions, chapter-wise, are Costa Rica, Argentina, Slovenia, Macedonia. Those were the most recent chapters added. And currently in development, we have Guatemala and Bolivia, the Dominican Republic, Latvia, Lithuania, Azerbaijan. And I heard from our United States coordinator, Jen, that Louisiana, Montana, and New Mexico are running for the United States. So that's quite a mouthful. If anybody has kept track of what I just announced, you can see a very big increase in the interest in Latin America. So I am quite happy about this. Did you want to say something, Peter?
No, I was just going to comment that that's just really wonderful. That's really wonderful to see that.
Right. So in essence, we are growing quite a lot. This is also due to getting local people in place, such as a Latin American coordinator who's able to help the people with interest from these countries in a much better way than I can. I speak Spanish, but it's very limited, and in a fast conversation doesn't work. So having somebody in place there has definitely helped get us set chapters up in a faster-paced way. Also, the teams on the local level are getting more stronger and able to help all the chapters in their neighborhood as well. So, moving on to the next point, though, Peter mentioned briefly the website that is currently in development for the chapters. I thought it might be a good idea to also explain a little what will actually be featured on this website. Most importantly, there will be a map of all the chapters in the world. We're still brainstorming on how we can develop this map, as it will be a complex piece of work, as I understood from the developers. This map should be able to, on a global, this map should be able to zoom in on any chapter, on any sub-level possible in the world, which is why it will be a difficult job. I'm thinking on the lines of a Google map, but not as ugly.
Right.
To sorry, Google, to make sure that anybody that right now is having trouble finding their chapters will be able to just zoom in and find their chapter, also linked to a database so that you just can put in wherever you are, and that the map will automatically zoom to that level to see if there's a chapter. This will make it easier. Other big and important point is that there will be protocols on this website. Being a year and a couple of months further into since the start of the movement, we obviously have had some issues here and there. We can't say it's all been sunshine. In order to avoid such issues on the organizational level, we will have some guidelines / protocols which will help explain the recommended organization of chapters and certain certain rules that we have to maintain in order to keep the integrity of the communication structure as it is.
Right.
Furthermore, we also have guides featured on there for the last couple of last half year, there's been a chapters guide on the main website, and I have had chapter coordinators that have had a chapter for a year and only noticed the guide to go. This is, of course, a little messy. So on the ZM Chapters website, there will be a very clear guide section with a lot of different guides. Mainly featured will be the chapters guide to make sure this is found easily, and we're going to make guides on activism. We're going to start the next Z-Day guide. We're going to do a lot of things to make sure that everything is documented and that most questions can be answered by just going through the guides, making the chapters independent, and also easing the stress off the larger order coordinators. All right.
Great.
I'm going to move on and trying to keep it as short as possible.
Great.
Okay. Well, I wanted to comment on our strategy. Mainly what we've been doing to develop chapters for the last year is waiting for people to get interested and make sure that we, when interest was expressed, that we guided them through the process of setting up a chapter. We're in the last phase of this with the passive stance, and when the last wave of chapters is handled and set up, I'm going to talk with our larger order coordinators to start a more aggressive approach, if you will, starting to actively look for people who would be suitable to start a chapter in their area, start making more suggestions. There has been an excellent suggestion by Cliff from Canada, who has found out that there are a lot of local groups that aren't necessarily on a national or state level, but more on the city level or county level or whatever smaller area. And we're going to actually, in some cases, consider putting up ghost templates, which would represent the website, but isn't actually a chapter in existence, but will be able to display certain local chapters so that they don't lose any attention that they might be losing if they weren't on a template. So these are just things that we're brainstorming on. But in general, we're going to get a little more aggressive in trying to get people interested in leading chapters. Obviously not trying to go too far with it, because these people also need to have the time and the right commitment. But the passive time is starting to blow over. I already mentioned here we had increased meetings on the local and international level. So again, if you want to be involved on a global level in decision making, this should be your venue. And tonight, actually, we're going to discuss something very interesting, although in a very early stage. Earlier, we spoke about the project World Hunger Solved, and this is going to start as soon as the first wave of the passive chapters has passed. But I am also brainstorming on more team projects, because team projects will give us a huge amount of attention and will also help profile the movement, not only by the movies but also by these projects. And in light of the recent ecological disaster with oil spin, I'm going to see if any chapter has good ideas. Otherwise, I might have some. And also making a team project in the ecological sense, focusing the light on what is wrong with the current ways of harnessing energy and what alternate ways there are to actually make this way of harnessing energy, obsolete. So that's something to look forward to as well.
Great.
We have decided a few months ago, 2 months ago, that Z-Day 2011 will be on March 12th. So you can note that down in your agenda. March 12th will be the Saturday, which is the official Z-Day, while March 11, 12, and 13 can function as the Z weekend, if you will, and you can plan your events around that. Obviously, we'll have more discussion about the main event and have a good evaluation.
Right.
Starting to run out of time, so going on. I'm launching a investigation as soon as more things calm down, in the right strategy to invoke interest in Asia and Africa. Obviously, we are talking about regions in the world that might have less accessibility to the to the methods to get into contact with the information that we're spreading. This isn't a priority, but since I've had some questions in my inbox about why we're not doing so much activism to get more African and Asian countries involved, I would just like to mention that it is very hard due to these limited accessibility issues, and it is definitely on the agenda, but I've also spoken about this with Peter quite a few times, and right now the movement is too young to actually go there, as well as was mentioned in the question that Peter handled earlier, that going in and doing community things in a physical way is quite hard for us right now. This also applies to Asia and Africa, and getting people there to actually spread the word, if you will. But it's definitely going to be investigated how we can do that best at this stage, and how we can do it best in the stages that are still coming.
Right, exactly.
Next announcement would be the internal education, which I briefly mentioned in the lecture on Z-Day in New York. This is something I've been wanting to focus on for quite a long time as a means of assisting chapters and getting them more ready, as well as the lecture team, which will have different training sessions. I will start planning a weekly or bi-weekly hour for chapters to focus on FAQ training and organizational recommendations, aside from the international meeting, so we can start using that for more broader subjects. These training hours will basically handle the most interesting new questions and most repeated asked questions that are already there. Aside, for example, we could use the knowledge base, take the info out of there, and start communicating with each other about how we can communicate this best to people we meet every day or in our chapter activities.
Right.
Next, sorry for the long list. It's been a while since I've been on here. Next, I'm working on a Z-Day compilation. The Z-Day compilation is essentially a collection of all the Z-Day videos that I've been getting from people, and we're going to try to roll this out as soon as possible, as a lot of people did have to make some edits after Z-Day, but the final submissions are rolling in. So as soon as that's done, I'll make sure that I notify Peter and hopefully send it out through the global email list, and everybody will be able to see how Z-Day looks worldwide. So that should be exciting. Additionally, we're going to start doing visual chapter updates to compile for everybody what's being decided in both the international meetings and what is happening on the local chapter level. In addition to that, the chapters will be getting more visual in terms of making more videos, making more pictures of all their events, and on a monthly basis, I'm going to try doing a news reading style update, notifying everybody what's happening with the chapters worldwide, and hopefully showing a lot of footage as well to make sure that people get the right idea of where the movement is going on a chapter level. And the final point I wanted to make is that the update to the chapters guide, which the chapters have been hearing about in the meeting, and as I briefly mentioned earlier as well, is underway, and it should be a few weeks because the guide that was up was quite outdated. And with recent developments in both the organization and the movement, it just deserves a good update. So I'm hoping to present that very soon.
Great. Excellent.
Oof, that was a long list. Sorry.
No, that's great. That's fantastic. Yeah, chapter updates will be good for the newsletter as well. As I mentioned earlier on, we'll definitely give a chapter presence, keep an international presence, as much of an international presence as possible in most of our communications. I think people tend to forget that this is a absolutely international organization, and we have to find ways to really make that clear, even though the majority of people that are involved are of the English-speaking origin, naturally, because our website isn't quickly converted into other languages, at least not as quick as it should be. But hopefully we can get. But that's actually a good thing I wanted to point out. The linguistics team has been doing a lot of great work with updates to assist us with translations overall in multiple mediums, from videos to documents. So that was one thing I forgot to mention earlier. But anyway, Gilbert, thank you so much. Anything else you want to add?
No, that was definitely it, and very happy with the linguistics team as well. So
absolutely.
Hopefully you can get a few more questions done, and we'll talk. Are you at the international meeting?
Yeah, I'll pop in the international meeting. I have to prepare for my trip tomorrow, but I will definitely be in there briefly. But then that's at 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time tonight, correct?
Correct, then 2300 GMT. So.
Gotcha.
All right, thanks, Peter.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Gil.
All right, bye.
Bye. Okay, I have 7 minutes left. Let me plow through whatever questions I have left. I was jumping to this question at near the end of the forum thread, which was a series of questions, and the individual claimed that I had never answered his questions, so I'm going to do those, even though these questions seem a little familiar. Okay, in games, here's the question reads, in games, my friends and I always wanted to be the best and want to improve ourselves and beat the other team with all the tools given. I would call this competition, wouldn't you? Is this kind of competition bad and destructive? Well, obviously, it's been a staple of competition to say that it's a form of self-improvement, which it is. I think there's just a psychological renovation needs to occur where people don't get obsessed with beating somebody else as opposed to getting better. There is a difference there. Do I think that in time there could be a level of maturity where people will play against each other, as some do, where they don't get into a position of resentment, where they don't want to come back the next week and, quote, beat them? The problem is that the whole society seems to reinforce this us against them competitive mentality, from the economic system to these ego manifestations about being better than somebody else, when in abstraction there's no such thing. Anyone that's ever been really good at something has eventually been outdone. It's almost idiotic when you think about it, where you think you can be the best at anything. So, from that angle, there is a neurotic quality that exists in the competitive mentality that we see, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's all it is. So I agree with you in part. Competition can be productive in that sense, but I think the change has to come from people competing against themselves. Self-improvement directly, as opposed to valuing yourself by comparing yourself to someone else. I mean, I think it's easy to say that most people in the world today don't look at themselves from a value basis that's internalized. They look at themselves by comparing themselves to other people, so comparing the way they look, women comparing their weight, stylization of advertising, comparing should I be thin, should I have my hair short? These things are so dominant now that the neuroses is just so obvious. I'm hoping that people will wake up and begin to value themselves based on their relationship to themselves, as opposed to constantly comparing themselves to others, which is really a form of neuroses. So I'll leave it at that because I'm running out of time. Number 3, the Z-Day intro you put up, where the video of the little girl is speaking in front of the UN. The question which I had is why did they let her speak in the first place if all those people didn't want to get into sustainable systems because they can't make profit out of abundance? Well, come on. The little girl was the daughter of a well-known environmentalist. They probably thought it was amusing to let her speak, and they probably had no idea the amazing speech that she was going to give and the effect that it had, and it has reverberated ever since on the internet and across the world. A very famous speech. So they didn't know any better when they put her up there, I'm sure. And of course, obviously, nothing's changed. Number 4 of this question, in the part diagnosis of your lecture, Social Pathology, you show some charts with some data, yet you leave out countries for certain statistics. Well, I didn't make those charts. They're made by Richard Wilkinson. And if you read his book, you'll notice that it relates to wealthy countries. The statistical sets were compiled by other studies, and basically you have to deal with the information that you're given, the data sets that you're provided with. So I'm sure other data sets could be created that are completely holistic, But you really don't need any more than to understand the state of the wealthy countries and the neuroses that's been generated, the health problems that have been generated because of this tremendous stratification. So I hope that answers your question. It's not that they're omitted, it's that they're not actually relevant to the data set. Number 5, in your lecture, Social Pathology, you talk about income inequality and how it affects a person's mental and health state. I wonder why this is data for each country. I mean, why would people only care about the inequality of their own country so they feel worse? I don't get the point here by dividing this data up for each country. Okay, it's a psychosocial phenomenon. People, in fact, I'll state it this way. It's a psychosocial phenomenon that's basically psychological, where if you live in a society where you're surrounded by people that are doing better than you, that have better goods than you, that have better health than you, that are just simply doing better based on the levels that based on the ranking system that is perpetuated in the economic system, such as class stratification, this has a direct effect on your health. It causes stress. If you look at the work of Dr. Robert Sapolsky, or if you look at the Whitehall studies, they relate to this as well. Stress is a very, very, very deadly thing. And as far as all the other social problems that were talked about in social pathology, which again came from Richard Wilkinson, they have to do with this psychosocial phenomenon of experiencing a world around you that you are deprived of, essentially. And this goes for the majority of the population in every country, because of this propensity of the system of the corporate free market to divide everything because of its basis in exploitation and self-interest of certain groups, which the bigger they become, the more powerful they become. It's, again, like a cancer. So I hope that answers your question. I wasn't entirely sure. Let's see here. We have 2 minutes left. Let me go back to where I was before. Number 10. Sorry for those that might transcribe this, but now I'm back to my original set of questions at number 10. I understand that the Zeitgeist Movement is about informing people about the corruption of the monetary system, the collapse of society, and the like, but do you think that spreading this information will also increase the depression and suicide rates? Well, no, because we're doing something that no other social organization is doing, and that's providing a solution. It's one thing to constantly go after the rogue corporations and all those individuals that are out there for their own self-interest, but we provide a solution. And if you think about what the Venus Project is about and what comprises a resource-based economy and the inherent logic, the inherent basis on life support as opposed to monetary sequence mutation, you begin to see that it should be enlightening for people to see what's possible. I'm enlightened by this understanding. I was nothing but profoundly enlightened by meeting Jacques and digesting this basic, simple information, and how simple life could be. Society doesn't have to be mirrored in debt and stress and labor occupations. I mean, how many more people am I going to hear about that have killed themselves because they can't find a job? This is just profoundly sick. So, from that standpoint, I think people just need to look at what's possible and then start to move towards that possibility as opposed to wallowing in the depression of the current system and all the disorder that's inherent. Okay, I'm running out of time here. Okay, I'm going to have to stop here because there's no way I'm going to be able to answer these questions in 30 seconds. So I'll play the music that will eventually cut off, and I will talk to you all very, very soon. Thank you all for being here, and I'll try to have another broadcast within a few weeks and more frequently. Thanks a lot, everybody.